Imagine this. The year is 2005. You are a schoolboy in India. Morning assemblies means standing in straight lines under the blazing sun singing the national anthem. Socks pulled up, shoes polished till they shine. And you wonder why. Why does a crooked tie matter so much? Why must I march in straight lines when American kids in movies stroll in the school in t shirts and sneakers? Now, jump back a century and a half. The year is 1850 and you are a young lawyer in Calcutta. The courtroom is an oven. A black wool gown pins your arms. A starched collar bites into your neck. On your head sits a horsehair wig designed for foggy London, now melting in Bengal heat. And you wonder, why? What does this costume have to do with the law? Comfort was never the point, discipline was. That's the thread running from schoolyard tie to courtroom wig. The British used clothing to teach order, obedience, and hierarchy, values stitched into society, many of which, like the lawyer gowns and the school uniform, we still follow today.
Classwork, homework, punishment, lecture. Good.
तारीख तारीख पर तारीख तारीख
The British shaped Indian fashion in profound ways, but the influence was never one sided, and that is the story we're about to explore. Let's go. Let's start by talking about the infamous British clubs like the Bengal Club in Calcutta or Bombay's Willingdon Club, where entry was measured not just by wealth or ancestry but also by clothes. Dinner jackets, starched shirts, evening gowns. For Indians seeking entry, wearing Western formal wear became a social passport. The club dining room thus staged a nightly pageant of empire, an aesthetic that later spilled into cinematic and post-colonial elite culture. And to this day, many of these colonial clubs still exist and they still enforce the old rules. Ties, jackets, no sandals, reminder of the Raj still stitched into modern leisure. The empire's wardrobe didn't just impose, it also helped create new industries. By the 1880s, tailoring houses in Calcutta and Bombay were thriving. Parsi entrepreneurs advertised the perfect English cuts, but stitched them in breathable Indian cotton. Out of this fusion came the tropical suit, pale, unlined, adapted to the subcontinent's heat. For clerks, teachers, and civil servants, the pant and shirt became the uniform of respectability. It was at this point that schoolboys were brought into the system. At institutions like Cathedral and John Connon in Bombay or La Martiniere in Calcutta, blazers and tailored shirts became mandatory. The message was clear: to dress modern, you have to stitch yourself into the colonial silhouettes. Homi K. Baba, the Harvard scholar of post-colonial theory, once described colonial mimicry as the desire for a reformed, recognizable other. Almost the same, but not quite. That phrase fits a figure unique to colonial Bengal, the Babu. Usually a clerk or lawyer, he wore a frock coat or waistcoat over a dhoti, carried an umbrella and spoke polished English. His look was an uneasy balance of East and West, and it made him one of the most recognizable caricatures of the Raj. Indian artists were quick to poke fun. In Kalighat paintings, the Babu is shown lounging with his hookah or striking exaggerated poses, a man of vanity and leisure. Bengali cartoonists and satirists joined in too. Plays, pamphlet, and popular sketches mocked his anglicized manners and his obsession with style over substance. For many Indians, the Babu was a reminder of what happened when imitation went too far. The British, on the other hand, had their own version. In Punch magazine, the Babu was lampooned as pretentious and effeminate. His English was a punchline, his outfit a joke. Half clerk, half clown. Surely the paradox. For the British, he was not English enough, and for the Indians, he was too English. The Babu sat in the middle, mocked by both directions. In hindsight, he was ahead of its time. Today's Indo Western fashion, the blazer over a kurta, the sherwani styled like a suit, echoes the silhouette once ridiculed in paintings and cartoons. So, the Babu may have been a joke then, but his hybrid style has become the norm now. Take the sherwani. Born in the late 19th century, it blended the long Indian achkan with a European frock coat. The sherwani soon became formal attire for elites and later the wedding wear of choice across North India. Its straight cut buttons and tailored fits are reminders of colonial influence. And yet today when a groom steps out in a sherwani, it feels not foreign but unmistakably Indian. Before the British Raj, the Indian women's ways of wearing a sari, draping a sari, were as varied as the regions in India. In many places, the sari was draped to cover the torso on its own. In others, women wore short, cropped cholis or bodices with ties at the back, leaving the midriff bare. Petticoats existed too, but they weren't universal. The sari often just tucked directly at the waist. Colonial influence changed that. Victorian ideas of modesty, pressed by schools, missionaries, and reformers, made stitched blouses and underskirts not just common but expected in public, and their design began to shift. Blouses grew longer and more fitted, with higher necklines and sleeves, closer to Victorian dress. Petticoats became standard too, giving the sari more structured and preventing it from clinging, in line with the modesty codes. In Bengal, Janandani Devi of the Tagore family popularized this new style in the 1870s after seeing Parsi women in Bombay. She returned with the Brahmika sari, pleated, draped over the shoulder, worn with blouse and petticoat. It caught quickly among the Bengali middle class and then spread across India. That's why today it's impossible to imagine a sari without a blouse and a petticoat. And the version we now think of as traditional is actually a colonial era adaptation.
No rush.
But while the Industrial Revolution brought
Let's talk about a 19th century European fashion craze, the Kashmiri shawls. Woven from fine Himalayan pashmina, soft and light yet warm, they became the ultimate luxury in Europe. And no one adored them more than Empress Josephine, yes, the wife of Napoleon and the fashion icon of the early 19th century. She owned as many as 400 shawls draped over her empire-line gowns. With Josephine as their ambassador, Kashmiri shawls became the mark of refinement in Paris. And the craze soon crossed the channel. By Queen Victoria's reign, the Kashmiri shawl was essential in Britain's aristocratic homes. But as it mostly does, luxury bred imitation. Authentic Kashmiri shawls were staggeringly expensive, out of reach for most. Demand pushed European factories into action, especially in Paisley, Scotland, where machine looms churned out cheaper copies. They reproduced the Indian bote motif, the curved teardrop design, so relentlessly that the pattern itself became known as Paisley, an Indian design renamed by industry and sold back to the world. And Paisley's story doesn't end there. In the 1960s, it came roaring back, this time as rebellion. The Beatles wore paisley after their trips to India. Hippies wrapped themselves in paisley scarves and shirts at Woodstock, turning a once royal motif into the fabric of counterculture. Even today, paisley prints walk runways and hang in closets everywhere. But behind every curve of that familiar motif lies a story. A Kashmiri design rebranded in Scotland and made global by the empire, and revived by generations who never knew its origins. Bengal's muslin was once called woven air. So fine it could pass through a ring, so light it seemed to vanish in your hand. For centuries, it dressed Mughal courts and dazzled European traders. By the late 18th century, muslin had become the fabric of choice in Europe. In London and Paris, women wore it as flowing gowns, translucent, elegant, and daringly modern. Some even caused scandal. Critics complained the gowns were so sheer they looked indecent. But the same fabric that shimmered in European ballrooms carried a darker story back home. In the 1700s, Bengal supplied nearly 40% of Britain's textile imports. By the mid 1800s, after decades of tariffs and restrictions, that figure had collapsed to almost nothing. Entire communities lost their livelihoods, and the reason was Manchester. Machine milled cotton from Britain was up to 80% cheaper than hand woven muslin. It flooded Indian markets, undercutting local artisans. What had once been Bengal's greatest pride became unsellable. In Europe, the look lived on. Manchester cottons replaced Bengal handlooms, feeding Britain's industrial revolution. But the magic of muslin, its gossamer quality, its artistry, was never recaptured. And yet, the story isn't over. In recent years, researchers and weavers in Bangladesh and India have been working to revive Dhaka muslin, retracing lost techniques, replanting the rare cotton variety once used, and training artisans in its delicate weave. The results are few and precious, but they show what was once thought impossible, that the fabric of legends might breathe once again. Before the rise of the empire, Britain's jewel boxes looked quite different. Diamonds were unheard of. Until the 18th century, the only source in the world was India's Golconda mines. A few famous stones reached Europe, but for most people, jewelry meant pearls, gold, and colored glass. The Raj changed that. With direct access to Indian markets, Britain found itself in the heart of the gem trade. Indian diamonds, Burmese rubies, Ceylonese sapphires, Persian Gulf pearls all moved more easily through colonial networks. For the first time, precious stones became central to the British aristocratic taste. Indian craftsmanship shaped this too. Mughal settings favored large, uncut stones mounted in gold, often backed with enamel. European jewelers began resetting these gems into tiaras, necklaces, and crowns, fusing Indian stones with Western styles. So now, when you look at Britain's crowns or its portraits through the ages, you see more than adornment. You see how India's gems and aesthetics transformed British fashion, turning rare stones into imperial symbols and foreign styles into markers of English refinement. In 1903, at the Delhi Darbar, Lady Curzon, the American-born wife of the Viceroy, made an entrance no one forgot. Her gown, soon to be called the peacock dress, was designed in Paris but embroidered in India. On its silver cloth, Indian artisans stitched thousands of iridescent beetle wings to create peacock feathers. Under the lights, the gown shimmered in greens and blues, a living jewel. Beetle wing embroidery had long adorned Indian robes and saris, but here it fused with Western couture to dazzle an imperial audience. Today, it sits in London's Kerrelston Hall, admired for its beauty. But behind the shimmer lies a sharper truth. Indian skill was paraded not for itself, but to project imperial grandeur. And that Indian designs didn't just survive the empire, they transformed fashion far beyond it. The Raj tried to stitch its order into Indian lives, but by doing so, it wove India's culture into its own. That's why even today, when you fasten a button, knot a tie, or drape a sari, you're wearing traces of history where every garment carries the weight of the empire in some way. If you like that video, hit subscribe and follow me as I explore amazing, fascinating stories about Indian history and mythology. Thanks for watching. See you soon.